JB Cycles with an update on June the 11th. My 4-week cycle here in black shows that we are approaching the cycle low, and we see no bearish action in this bearish phase. Zooming in, we see again the low of the cycle is just a couple of days ahead, and we see no bearish action, so this is a very bullish right translated cycle. And there should be some kind of a reaction down here, and this could set up a bearish pattern similar to this one last fall, where we had a very bullish right translated cycle and then a very bearish left translated cycle coming thereafter. So you can almost call it an inversion here. Or you have two cycles merging into one cycle, where the cycle high is at the cycle low here in the middle. But odds do not favor that bearish setup, but it may happen. Looking at the daily data for the S&P, this daily sell setup looks more and more ripe. We are very close to such a sell setup. Actually, I would say we are right there, or give or take a couple of days. So some kind of a selling setup coming up here that could confirm that the possible scenario from the 4-week cycle. Looking at momentum, yeah, we are close to some kind of a selling setup. But in the bull market, this could stretch and go further than you normally would expect. At least in the bear market, the tops come typically very quick and early. So we have to watch that. Here's my 7-year cycle in red, and as I have said previously, I turn very bearish around at this point. Actually, I was starting to get bearish a little bit earlier, but you know, being aware that the top may come where the cycle really turns down. Also, I said this is the crash phase of the cycle, ending around October, and I said that may be a bear market low, but it may go further down. But here we don't have quite the same edge for continuation to the downside, and as we see, the market has not shown any more downside. But in green I have my 40-week cycle, and within it we have a 20-week cycle. I have shown the 20-week cycle lows here with red vertical lines, and this cycle is expecting some kind of a low around, could be as early as July or August, September, or even October, just as the 7-year cycle shows some kind of a low in this period. But market is behaving bullish, and the top is getting more and more, say, bullish right translated, leaving us less and less time for any downside here. My cycles, you know, I've been following these 3 cycles, and lately realizing it's the quarterly cycle that is dominant, but as we see, we have very little time for any downside in this cycle. Just a couple of weeks, it looks like. But you know, the low may be a bit late into early or mid-July. That may happen. And we have this possible bigger cycle, the half-year cycle. Typically we have a low around March or October, so this one suggests a possible low coming up here. So you know, this scenario looks more and more like we don't get any deep downside here coming up in June, July. Then the question is, do we get the breakout rally, or does it fail, making us some kind of a double top here and then a low in the fall? The seasonal variation, this is the average, the annual average over a period. I don't remember, from the 80s and into well, it's a period over about 30 years, I think, or so. not the recent 7-8 years are included here. Showing a seasonal tendency for a top around early June, sell in May and go away, and a low around October. But you know, the average is influenced by a couple of years that were very bearish. So many years we rally in this period. We have those very bearish years making this seasonal variation. So we expecting some kind of downside here, then the breakout rally unless it fails, and we get some kind of a double top and a reaction down. We have the hourly data for Dow Jones Industrial. Last week I said this pop-up made me expect some kind of a continuation, making an ABC, and that's what we are seeing. And the hourly data is giving us some kind of a selling setup, but it looks a little bit early. I would maybe look for another 1 or 2 days going up or sideways, and it's a bit tricky because I think the Fed decision is coming up this week. I haven't checked, but I think it's the coming week, and yeah, anything can happen in the Fed decision week. So and also I showed that the 4-week cycle is soon turning bullish, and then we typically get the pop. So do we get the pop after a downswing and then we get the pop, or do we get a blow-off pop? Yeah. And a bit longer term, Dow Jones. You know, yeah, this could go on for a little bit. It's not an obvious selling setup quite here in the momentum indicator, but as you see, go back here, we may turn down abrupt and early. Sometimes you need time for topping out, sometimes it just comes sudden. Also we have a trend line here, we have some space, we are not about to break it, so yeah. So some kind of a selling setup coming up in the coming few days. And longer term, we have I've been talking about the 7-year cycle, and that is made up out of 2 3.5-year cycles. So here I have shown the 3.5-year cycle, and it is now bullish. It's bullish for the next, say, 18 months into November next year. But at this point in the cycle, market may be a little bit out of sync with the cycle. And if we look at these green lines, we see at this point in the cycle we had some continuation of the bear market in the 50s. Also here in the early 80s we saw the market was a bit out of sync with the cycle, and we had bearish action from this point on, and the long bear market in early 2000s, that one was not finished at this point. And also we have the COVID crash. You know, we had this low here in 2019, I think, and you know, it was a bit early compared with the cycle, but the market started to rally, making new highs. So everything pointed to a new bull market, a new bullish cycle. But then we had the COVID crash, a bit into the bullish phase of the next cycle. So there could be, it's not impossible to have some kind of a flush down here the next 6 months into a low in the fall. It's possible, but not very likely. But we should either find some momentum here and going back to the all-time highs. If we stay here, we are vulnerable for a flush down again. So could also show the 25-week cycle. I follow that one going back in time. It has not been working that well lately, but this one is also going down into around September. So, see ya!